This is ACOFAE. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
There will be spoilers in this episode specifically from the world Sarah J. Maas has created, as well as topics mentioning sex work, physical violence, and substance abuse. Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, your weekly deep dive into the YA literature and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And today we are discussing the ultimate training montage book, of course, Heir of Fire, book number 3, or maybe number 4, depending on how you read them, from Sarah J. Maas in the Throne of Glass series.
Celaena is such a fucking badass. I continue to stand by my love, this statement. I stan her unconditionally. I love her. I don't know. I know you said that you were not sure who I was going to like just yet. And I know I have a lot of characters that I still need to read. But I think I'm just going to hold firm with this right now. I don't know if you think there's somebody else yet.
So my question for you then would be, do you prefer Celaena or do you prefer Aelin?
They're one and the same.
Are they?
Well, Celaena is who Aelin had to be to kind of process her trauma and get through the last 10 years.
I have a theory, but that will come later, and we will speak about it. We will not forget to talk about this point.
Unrelated, can I just say, I mean, I have a couple notes, but one of them is, maybe we'll talk about that later, but I will say, I was reading this book and I was talking to one of my friends and I just said, I love, how much I loved a romance and a contemporary romance. But right now it just seems so fucking boring. I just want to be bitten and go to war and slay some shit. And I think wow. And I think I'd rather be bitten by fae than vampires at this point. And that's a whole different conversation. But I never thought that that's where I would be at where I am in my life.
So we've turned the corner now. We need more in life than just a billionaire boss. I don't know the plots of those books.
It's exactly that. The billionaire trope. My boss becomes the enemies to lover boss that's a really popular one.
Although we do like enemies to lovers.
I love an enemies to. I mean, that's number one trope.
Enemies to lovers, one bed trope. I mean, you get a one bed trope here.
Yes,
in Heir of Fire.
Yes, but it doesn't feel as tropey. But I also think it's kind of funny how when they first have it, they have Rowan. He's all the way on the other. They made it a point to say he's basically hanging off the bed.
So you bring up Rowan. So I want to point out to everybody listening that Jessica and I have not thoroughly discussed this book before recording this episode. So I do not know all of her deep, dark thoughts about this. So Jess, how do you feel about Rowan?
Oh, I feel like I'm so fucking basic. I like him. He's so cute. They're so sweet together. Every time she describes Rowan, she's like, oh, I could smell him, the cool wind and pine. All I keep thinking of is that Mocha Pine gelato we had in Rome.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what he would taste like too. I don't know. You keep telling him he's this cool breath of fresh air and pine, and that's exactly what the gelato tastes like. That's how I imagine he tastes.
Well, now that's all I can think about.
It's the best. It's my favorite thing in the whole world.
So Rowan, there is a bit of a controversy surrounding Rowan, and I don't know if you're aware of this.
No, I'm not. I've tried to stay away from spoilers as much as possible. Somebody commented on my TikTok about Rowan before I had gotten super into it, and I didn't read the comment and I didn't acknowledge the comment because I don't want to be spoiled. So luckily nobody's spoiled it for me. So thank you if you are listening. I appreciate it. I don't like spoilers. I'm all about being surprised and having that raw emotion, as Laura will tell you. Like, I'm either screaming or crying, or even at the end of this book, as I was finishing it, I sent her a picture of me with teary eyes as Aelin saying, like, I'm going to rattle the stars. And I'm like, this is so great.
Well, you bring up a good point about spoilers. You were spoiled going into this series about Rowan, the one big thing about Rowan. So
About them being together?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, you know that.
That I knew. And I don't know if I would have made that connection immediately. Like, I have to think I would. I had the revelation with Rhys. So I knew it was going to happen, but I didn't put the two together about Celaena and Aelin.
Yes, thank God. Thank God. Of course, everybody knows that Rowan and Aelin are mates, but in this book, they are not. So the controversy that surrounds Rowan is that he's violent towards her. Yes, it's in a very like training kind of way. And like, yes, he is very broken himself. He has all these issues that we learn about, but he strikes her. He is horrible to her. He says just the worst things to her, and he hurts her. He hurts her very bad. But the controversy kind of is in comparison to Rhys, because Rowan gets a 1-book redemption arc, right? He starts off really awful in this book. The first time we're meeting him, it's this book. He starts off terrible. And then by the end of this book, we learn about what happened to his mate. We learn about why he is the way he is. We learn that he is trying to piece himself back together, and he has, dedicated himself to Aelin by the end of this book, and he's her loyal, like, I don't want to say subject, but like, I guess partner, he's her first member of her court, and the redemption arc is complete in this book, right?
I feel like in this book also, when he was pledging the blood oath to her, it was very different than pledging the blood oath to Maeve, because he was just in such a broken place that he was like, well, and it's discussed a lot in the beginning of this book about a male phase purpose is to protect, to do this, to do that. And when his mate was murdered along with his child, he still had that innate need to protect. So I guess he just kind of defaulted to Maeve because that's kind of consistent for him, or like just consistency and routine in general. And when he pledged his blood oath to Aelin, it wasn't a matter of servitude in a way. It didn't feel like he was doing it as like a subject. It felt like, because she didn't want it. She goes, I don't want this. I don't. And it feels more of an equal in a way. I almost think of it as like Cassian and Az, when they liked protecting Feyre, but then when they find out that she's High Lady, it just brought how they protect her to a different level.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So, as I was saying before, the controversy with Rowan is that he was so violent to her, and then he does just a complete like change, and then he's so devoted to her by the end of this book, but the relationship started off with this extreme violence. Is this sort of like a Stockholm syndrome situation? Like, they were isolated, just the two of them, yes, there were other people at Mistward, but they were together every single day for long periods of the day. And so there is a portion of the fandom that doesn't like this ship and will, denounce Rowan, I guess is the right word, to anyone that will listen. So it's an interesting topic to bring up, because there is a larger percentage of the fandom that adores Rowan.
The same could be said about Rhys.
Well, exactly. And with Rhys, he's very much the villain in ACOTAR, which we have an ACOTAR episode coming up, so we'll discuss that. But he's a villain in book 1, and he's a villain for like most of you know,
there's a lot of gray area. It's not so black and white. And it's not that I'm for the violence. Absolutely not. But I feel like some of the physical altercations were part of training. But I guess you can argue, or there's a way you can do that without being so nasty. And I remember texting you. I go, the things that he's saying, I hope that he regrets them. And even if he was saying them just to kind of incite something from her, I hope he regrets it, especially when you knew he inevitably was going to find out more about her backstory. I wanted him to feel bad. He said some really, really shitty things to her. And it was stuff that she was already telling herself. It was stuff that he had no idea that they were playing on repeat in her head, that Nehemia was saying to her, that, conversations she's had with Sam. He was a piece of shit, and he still hasn't apologized for it, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, no, and that's part of it. That's a big part of it. So this being Sarah's first series, I think we've talked about it before, but you can see where she pulled things from this into her other series.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to bring up the biting, obviously, because what does he say after he bites her? He says, "There you are."
Oh, I was so excited.
It's like, oh, okay, because he's seeing her true, I mean, yeah, I guess it'd be her true self, her fae self for the first time. And, Sarah obviously pulled that and put that in ACOTAR. And it's just very interesting to see Sarah's evolution as a writer using these books as a baseline.
And even somebody, I can't remember who, they were referencing Celaena. I think it was Celaena at the time. They were referencing her as girl. And I go, oh, it's Amryn. Oh, I missed Amryn.
So I think it's important. I mean, there's a lot going on in this book, but I really want to touch on Dorian, because Dorian has a huge kind of arc in this book.
I feel like Dorian grew as a person in this book, especially because, yeah, he really was isolated for most of the time, with the exception of Saoirse. And you saw the hints of it leading up to it in the previous books, saying, he's looking more and more like a king and not so much a prince, and just taking lead and being sure of himself. And by the end of this book, Chaol even says, he has that internal monologue of, I'm not looking at a prince, I'm looking at a king, and I think that's really important, that growth that he had, and that self. He really had to work on it with Saoirse, because he had no idea. Him and his friendship with Chaol was very splintered, and who was he going to trust? He couldn't trust anybody, especially when Nehemia was gone. Chaol he couldn't talk to. He had one person who knew of this huge secret and didn't judge him for it.
Yeah, well, and Chaol is super judgy, and I personally think he's a giant piece of shit.
Yeah, how come there's so many Westfall fans? Chaol fans? Is it just because, did you just stop reading at book 2? Because even at the end of book 2, I was like, Rah.
That's a really good question that cannot be discussed at this moment.
Oh, okay.
But will be touched on when we do other reviews of other books. But I personally think...
This is me just being judgy now.
Well, I personally think, and I will stand by this, that he's a piece of shit. And, I don't care. I don't care that his relationship with Dorian is very strong, and that at the very end is like, I love you, like, I get it, like, you're my king.
Although I really, when they were being all, and I think this goes back to other episodes we've had, especially our Crescent City episode, where Danica and Bryce can say, I love you, and everybody goes, oh, are they lesbians? Are they lovers? But here you have a bro moment of Dorian and Chaol saying, I love you, and nobody's batting an eye. I bet you Wattpad went shit crazy and has so much Dorian Chaol ship fanfics because of that moment. And good. I really was like, you know what? I want to have them be a ship.
They are.
Okay, see, I'm not far off.
You're not far off. Those TikToks that are like, these people would have been a couple if the author had balls.
Oh.
Or the other TikToks that are like, they did it, I just can't prove it.
I haven't seen knows? But because their relationship, because they were friends since they were children before, and it just reminded me of the Song of Achilles. Like that book, that relationship that they had known each other since they were children, and they just developed this very strong bond. Yeah, I can see that. Or even like an experimental phase. They totally.
Yeah. I mean, it's not said, but it's pretty much canon.
Or even when they talk about, it's no surprise Dorian has like all these contraceptive tonics. Like, they orgied together at some point.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. But, Dorian, I love Dorian. And I love Dorian in books 1 and 2. But I really love him in this book just for his, like, iconic line in this book, which is, like, you can't pick and choose the parts of her to love.
Absolutely.
When he's talking to Chaol about Celaena. And Chaol's like, oh, blah, blah, magic, oh, fae, whatever. And Dorian is just like, dude, fuck off. You either love her or you don't. You either love all of her or none of her.
And the same thing could be said about him, Dorian himself, talking about himself. Like, you're not accepting her. Like, you can't pick and choose what parts of me you get to love, because now I have magic. You don't get to pick. I thought that was such an important line, because where's the love? Where's the unconditional love? Everything has stipulations if you're going to pick and choose. I loved, and it was so early on in the book too. I thought it was, it just kind of set the precedence of the direction of his characters going, I think.
And I like that it was said by a male character too. Just, somebody just owning up to everything and being like, it's all or nothing. And that's how it is. And I find it very interesting that over the training that is being done with Aelin and Rowan, over the course of that training, he also sees all of her. He sees her scars when she almost burns out. She tells him everything, more or less. There's a few things that she's not telling him, but he doesn't run. He doesn't balk. And even when he sees her scars in the bathtub, after she's burned out and she's like hunched over in the bathtub, and he sees her scars, and he has that like reaction, like, who did that to you? And he turns on his heel and he leaves, and he's flying around as a hawk, whatever. But he has that inner monologue like, shit, I should not have done this. I should not have left her. She probably thinks I'm this huge asshole for running from that.
And at that point, I think she had disclosed even some information of like people leaving her and just where she was with certain relationships in her life. And he had that recognition, like, not only am I an asshole, like she probably already has trauma from everybody else feeling left, even if, even with her parents, like it wasn't their choice that they left her, but like she's been left her whole life by people. And here I am, another person. And he came back.
He came back. Of course, we know that Aelin told Chaol and Dorian that she'll come back for them. And, she damn well better, because of what happens to Dorian. Now, Jess, we haven't talked about this, but from your perspective in that throne room, what happened to Dorian?
Dorian showed his hand unintentionally. Like, he just got so mad that Saoirse was killed. And I also have an issue with this when... And many storylines, people make these barter, I'll do anything you want, just don't hurt this person. And then they give all the information and they do it anyway. How many books have we read? And Dorian's a smart kid. He reads. He should know. And I don't know, maybe it's the rose-colored glasses of wanting dad's approval, of thinking if somebody came forward, and obviously Edian did, of sharing information, Saoirse wasn't going to get hurt. And so everything was going to be fine. No, people still hurt people. And now you gave the enemy more information and you still didn't get what you want. I don't understand. I don't understand that. But he showed his hand. He showed that he had powers. And the whole scene is the king basically admitting he had no idea what was going on, but he had an inkling. And he set up this whole gathering to see who would crack under pressure, essentially. And they all did.
Well, and now Dorian, of course, the tragic thing that happens to Dorian is now that he has a Wordstone collar around him, and now he's being devoured from the inside out by a Vlog prince, which is horrifying. And it just ends that way.
And he knew what the rings were doing to people, and now he has this collar.
Right. So now he's collared.
So I don't know if I'm going in this direction, if it's the right direction. And we haven't even talked about it yet. We talk about the 13, we talk about the witches, and I don't want to say that they're a backstory, but this definitely seems like it's laying the foundation for future exposure of the witches, obviously. But maybe it could be said because where the witches are, based on the map, it's close to where Chaol is going. Yes?
Where's Chaol going?
Isn't he going back to his...
He's going to Aniel?
Yeah.
That's where we assume he's going.
Oh.
But
because I know that I know that the witches have been training in the mountains, and Aniel, when I'm looking at the map, is over there. So then I'm wondering like what the connection might be there. If Chaol might go to the witches and talk about Dorian. Does Chaol not know about the collar? You can't, obviously the witches weren't added just because they're going to be in. So maybe they find a way to help Dorian get this collar, not just Dorian, but this evil Vogness away. Or maybe when Celaena comes back, when she channels her fire heart. How many nicknames does this girl have?
She has a few, and you have not heard them all yet.
So she uses her fire to maybe get the collar off. I don't know.
With the witches, of course, the witches are my favorite characters. The witches are going to Morath. That's where the witches are going.
Okay.
And it's pointed out in the book that there are already people in Morath. Those people are Caltaine, Duke Parrington, and Roland.
Right.
So there is going to be a big convergence in Morath, and something is going to happen there. So that is a really important plot point that is discussed at length. Some would say ad nauseum because they don't like the witches, but I like the witches.
You always like the witches. Like, no matter, especially depending on how they're told, I feel like whoever's writing it, whatever show we're watching, like the witches are usually pretty good.
There is one exception.
Are you going to say Bonnie Bennett?
No.
Okay.
No, I like Bonnie.
Bonnie got better when Elena died.
Bonnie and Damon's friendship is my favorite part of Vampire Diaries.
Oh, I do love their friendship, especially when they're stuck in that 1990s world. I think it's so cute.
Witches that I don't like, and this will go in the spoilers in the beginning of the episode, I fucking hate A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. I fucking hate that show. I fucking hate those books. They're absolutely awful. It's vampires for moms, and it's awful. Sorry, I'm like heated about it. It's just okay. Anyway, I told you were looking at wyverns earlier, trying to get an idea.
I was doing hot girl shit.
Jess is doing hot girl shit. And she was looking at wyverns, and I told her that as scary as Abraxos is, and he's a very scary boy, the fandom, we see him as Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon. And I love that. That's my favorite visual. You know, he's like stubborn, but like sweet, and he likes to sniff flowers. And I don't know. I really like Manon, and I really like Abraxos. Maybe because I'm desperate for a pet and I can't have one. And she's got this big like dog thing. She calls him a worm a lot.
I can't imagine when she's like, oh, he's just looking at me, and then just goes back to sniffing flowers and doing whatever. And then he eats the goat and he goes back to the flower.
Like, oh, sweet boy.
Oh, he's such a good boy.
And you know, he has his own struggle. I like the struggle of Abraxos, you know, coming from being a bait beast and learning how to fly and that whole story.
Is that going to be developed more? Because everybody keeps saying, oh, he's just a wyvern. They're not smart. They're not this, not that. But him and Manon have a connection, and she hasn't shared with anybody that she knows they have a connection. She knows that he understands her. He has like that fierce loyalty to her. And are people going to find out? Is she going to openly share that? Is that going to be something that she keeps special with herself?
That has already been discussed in this book with Keely and Petra.
Oh, when Keely and Petra, when that wyvern died.
Right. And how Petra couldn't get out of bed and she's very depressed, and Keely struggled and to hang on for life because she knew that Petra was still alive and Manon saved her. And like that whole plot about the bond between the wyverns and the witches is important and is I'm going to say the word useful later on in the books, because Manon does say like, oh, I hope people think I'm just doing this because of an alliance, because they're both heirs.
Okay.
So that's a whole thing. The Kraken witch that Manon had to murder in the Omega in the mess hall, that is an important plot point that will be brought up over and over and over again, simply because, for a lot of reasons, but what the Kraken says to Manon, she says that they aren't born evil, that they have hearts, but they're made into monsters. So that is, I don't know. The witches have a really fantastic story arc, but everybody really shits on them in Heir of Fire because all anybody wants is like Rowan and Aelin and like Dorian, Celaena and Sorsha and Aedion. Like nobody cared about the witches in this book. And then everyone has to like go fuck and then go back and read all the witches stuff later on just to figure out what they're talking about.
No, I like the witches. I just wasn't sure where it was going. And I think every time a witch scene portion of the book came up, I didn't know where it was going. And obviously now, even though the little that I know now, it's not so much where it's going in this book, but setting it up for like a long-term thing. I can see where people's argument of not liking the witches in this book, because you're waiting for something, but that something isn't going to happen here. And you don't know that until later.
Sarah plays the long game, as we know.
So many books of this.
And the references that Manon and the spiders go through are all references that we know about from reading Assassin's Blade. She's talking about the Queen of the Waste. Well, that's Ansel. She's talking about the traitor that, lost 20 years of his life for the spider silk. Well, that's the traitor that, Celaena met. And then the traitor's brought up again when in Mistward, what's his name? The old guy.
Emrys
and his mate Malachi have the dagger with the lotus blossoms. That's from Eowyn. They bought it from a trader from the Red Desert. That's the same, like you don't notice those things.
Or even I remember she was telling Rowan about Cressida, and then thinking of Crown of Midnight, where Celaena was saying, oh, maybe I'll tell you about the horse one day, like that whole adventure. And then knowing what we know from Assassin's Blade, and then she's openly talking about it in Heir of Fire with Rowan, you're like, there's that connection. She still hasn't shared that whole backstory with anybody.
It's a long game. And
I love that she's also very much like, oh yeah, I just totally she stole this horse, this magnificent mare, and forgets to drop the fact that she was terrified, and it wasn't she was being a badass. She goes, what are we doing? We're not supposed to be doing. And Ansel is just like, you gotta go. You want see it where I see you. I don't know how you're gonna get there. She never tells anybody the fact that it wasn't being a badass. She was just scared to even do that.
We were talking, and and you said that you were going to dive into chapter 54. And chapter 54 is a very heavy chapter. It's filled with a lot of memories. Sarah likes to do a heavy chapter 54.
Yeah, that has to be her mark. I go, this has to be a reoccurring theme, because 54 and 55, they go back to back, because right after that, just like in ACOFAE, where you have the heavy 54, and then I don't want to say lighthearted 55 of ACOFAE, but it's definitely not, I'm not going to even say emotionally heavy. 55 is what it is, 55. And this one, it was much lighter because she came out of the detail of 54. She realizes she's Fireheart. She owns her fears, and Rowan's acknowledging that because all the noises are being made. And he goes, everybody talks about letting the fear consume you. Nobody talks about if you challenge the fear. And it reminded me of Feyre and the Ouroboros.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly right. So I bring this up for two reasons. One is the theory that I want to discuss, but the other one is, how did you like hearing Aedion and Aelin make fun of little young Dorian for his like table manners and shit. I love that.
I thought that was so great. I love Sass. She's like, why are you eating so weird? And I see it. And I thought it was so perfect. I like Aedion and Aelin's relationship. I really do. I hope they find each other. They see each other again. I know they're not killing Aedion right away because King of Otterland wants to hold this over Aelin, not knowing that she's Celaena, to bring her back quicker. He knows, and that's why he's so fearful of Aelin, because just like Nehemia said, like he knows that Aelin being around, he's scared shitless. That's why he keeps doing what he's doing. He feels threatened because he knows what can come from Terrasen and Aelin. Doesn't know that she was living in his house the whole time.
The whole time.
Screwing his bodyguard and
almost screwing his son, but like they never, yeah. Oh, Dorian, I love you.
Wait, did Celaena ever make the connection of Dorian being her cousin?
I don't know if it's expressly said, but we know.
We know, but I'm just, because it just made me wonder at the beginning of the book where Dorian was making the connections and he goes, did she do this on purpose? Did she infiltrate? Like, was this her plan the whole time? And I'm thinking, like, then you don't know Celaena, because, and I told you that, I go, that's not what Celaena would have done. And later he realizes he's, without speaking with her, he was just like learning more about himself. He goes, who was I kidding? Like, that's not who she is as a person, and he's still attacking his own, I don't want to see demons, but definitely coming to terms of like who he is and what this means for him and next steps, because he still doesn't know much about himself.
Well, and he won't, because he's fucking collared with a demon inside of him now. So he's got to work through that, which is very interesting and will be discussed later. But I want to get to this theory because I know you, in your notes, you were like, oh, this thing, but I have read this other theory. So your theory is your worst enemy is yourself, right?
Right.
So do you want to expand on that? Like, she's in the pit of her memories. She's being attacked by the princes.
The Vog, yeah.
She's spiraling down. This is in Mistward when she's fighting the battle outside of the wall. And she's on the ground and she looks up and she sees Aelin. And, Aelin's like reaching her hand over and she's like, get up, get up, get up. And you said to me, like, your worst enemy is yourself. You have to like fight against that and like rise up and all of that. Right? Is that about right?
Right. Yeah. Rise.
So that was a really good point. But there's another theory for that moment.
Is it the theory that they think like it's her mother or Elena helping her in Aelin form?
No.
Oh, okay.
The theory is that Celaena dies there.
Okay.
So the theory is that the princes sucked her dry. All of those memories.
Sucked Celaena dry.
Yeah. So everything that happened, so Celaena dies. And then when she gets up, she takes Aelin's hand. She has now embraced, she's accepted. She's become Aelin.
Right.
And is a completely different person. And they say she's a queen now. So she went from all of that anger, all of that, fear, because we're talking about the stages of grief. So she went through all of the anger. She did all the training. She found acceptance by kind of embracing all of this pain, and Celaena died in that moment, and she accepted everything and came up as Aelin.
I can accept that.
Right?
I totally see that. And embracing who she was always supposed to be and who she always was.
Right.
Yeah, and she, that was the moment where she was no longer Celaena.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the last book of Celaena Sardathian. We close the chapter on Celaena in this book.
So now I need to learn how to say Aelin and not Celaena. I really like the name Celaena, though.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, it's spelled a little funky, but
But I think that's part of the reason I also like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's different.
It is. Celaena. Yeah, it's good. It's good. So now, of course, she is Aelin, and as Aelin, she goes to Maeve. And one of my favorite parts in the book is when she encircles the whole fucking city of Dornell with flame that does not burn. It's like, oh, bitch, you want to play? You want to build yourself a castle of stone filled with water? And then she's like, you can't burn my castle. She's like, well, I can fucking burn your people. Try me.
I love that. Which I also thought it was interesting because this whole I remember I had texted you and I said, I just don't understand why Maeve, she doesn't care about anybody but herself. She doesn't care about her people. She doesn't care about the land that she oversees. She obviously didn't help Mistward when they were under attack. She didn't help Terrasen when they were being attacked. So everything has been, and Celaena had said, she didn't come 10 years ago. You really think, and that was us. Like, you really think she's going to help your own people? And she didn't. It's exactly what she thought. So I love that she's piecing together and she figured out, which I also think is just brilliant. And I think I don't want to say mastermind, but I think if you have an enemy, you get that backstory. You do your digging. You do your research. And when push comes to she found out everything. She said, Emrys, tell another story. How about another story tonight? I would love to know more about my aunt. I just play the long game. I'm all about that shit.
It's pretty fantastic. I also like in this book, we are introduced to the cadre. We see, let's see if I can get all their names.
I don't get their names though. All of them.
It's Vaughn, Lorcan, Fenris, his brother, and Gavriel.
So wait, we meet Rowan's brother? I didn't know it was, they haven't really gone into depth of who they are.
They're not like brothers. They're like
brethren.
No, they're like a band of brothers, like warriors.
Okay.
Yeah. God, I can't, Colin? No, it's not Colin. Damn.
Lorcan, I've heard the name.
Yeah.
But I don't know much about him or what he looks like. I know through memes and stuff that's a name, and then I just keep scrolling because I don't want to know more. That's the extent of it. Oh, and Fenris?
Yeah.
Fenris. He's apparently, like, again, he's another one whose name I see that some people apparently, like, you know, when he comes to having, like, oh, this is my favorite of the boys or whatever, like, he's a very popular one whose name I see get tossed around, but I just don't know in what context.
This isn't a spoiler. This is just a fact about Fenris. His last name is Moonbeam.
Aww.
Don't you just love that?
I love that. And I also think it's funny that his shape is
a wolf.
Yes. I like that.
It's just one of the, we don't get a lot of, in this series, we get a lot of names for a lot of people. Everybody's got a lot of names and titles. But, in ACOTAR, we don't get a lot of names.
Maybe that's why everyone's so hung up on the names, because they're so used to people having last names in the Throne of Glass series.
And like a shitload of titles. But like Fenris, Moonbeam, we love that.
I do like that.
So cute.
Oh, man. Men are boring. Give me something supernatural.
Oh, for real. And then it's important just to like hit all the characters. You met just very briefly Elide in this book in a memory.
Right.
And as we've learned, if someone is named, that's somebody you need to like kind of keep track of. So we know Elide exists. We don't know a lot about her. And we know that her mother, Marion, was also very important to Celaena, and that she's
the reason she survived.
Exactly. Yes. She's the reason that she bought Celaena time. She got her out after the whole tragic, like, fucking murder of her parents. How horrible. And then to go, and that's what really kind of sticks with me. She went from that to waking up on the riverbank to fucking Arobin. And then from that moment on is trained as an assassin. She got no break. She went from this horrific murder to being a murderer. And like, I guess there's empowerment in that, being able to take care of yourself and feeling strong. I'm sure that helped, for a lot of the issues, but damn, the trauma.
Oh, 100%. And when has she actually, and she's never really confronted the trauma until this book. She's constantly running from it. But also rightfully so. I'd want to run from that type of trauma too. But I also, she was trained as an assassin, but I like that Rowan brings it a point to bring that up, to say you have an advantage. People who just rely on their magic, that's it. Once they're incapacitated, they can't protect themselves. And she has that advantage. And also for people who don't know her, it's a double whammy, you know? She's this crazy quadruple threat Fae queen who can be an assassin, who can use her magic, who can use different magical skills that she's still learning, because I feel like we still haven't seen the end of that yet, especially since now her and Rowan are Caranon. They could kind of interchange each other's powers maybe, or just tapping into their magical well. I don't know. But I think it's really interesting to see her continue to grow because, again, this is only book 3.
Or 4, depending on how you count them.
Or 4. There's still a lot more books I have to read.
You're like half. You're half. You're halfway.
Oh, man.
You were just saying just then about the end of this book. And the end of this book is she gets on a boat and she's coming back. You know, she's coming back to Aelin, and Rowan can't go with her, obviously, because he's like a 6'2" long-haired Fae male. And he's like, I have another form. It's like, yeah, you're a fucking bird. Like, how are you going to help me over there?
I know. She's like, what are you going to, she's like, there's no magic. You want to eat some rats? That's cute.
Yeah.
I love that.
So she's going back.
I love her sass. I love her so much.
You got me thinking about boats. There's a subtle Assassin's Blade reference that would get looked over if you weren't, you know, kind of tuned in, where Ren and his grandfather are Murtagh. They're talking about the reports that they got about where the towers are and what Rolf saw when he was in the Dead Islands. And of course, we know Rolf is the pirate lord from Assassin's Blade. And it's very quick. It's very throwaway. Like, he's not interested. He has his territory back. He isn't going to help us. But he did see things like brewing out there. But now that they're gone, because whatever was brewing in the Dead Islands, they sent over to Wendelin. And that's what Aelin and Rowan discover in the cave. And that's what they end up fighting. And, you know, on and on and on. But that's a little Assassin's Blade tie in there that if you didn't read it, you'd just be like, well, I don't know who the fuck those people are. But he's named, so I guess he'll show up later. But we know the rich backstory.
I feel like a lot of people who don't read Assassin's Blade and Tower of Dawn, I've openly seen them say, oh, you know, it's kind of confusing, but you eventually piece things together. Okay, but do you really want to piece things together like that? There's this whole other story. I don't know. We've said it before. I want any little crumb of information when I like something. Even when Sarah posted that excerpt on New Year's Day about Azriel, and we're like, the whole fandom just has a meltdown. I'm obsessed. I love it. I'm so glad I wasn't working. To just be able to completely embrace that, I just want just a little crumb, anything, please. More porridge. Like, let me Oliver Twist the shit out of everything that Sarah writes. There's a lot of books that aren't good. We read them anyway, just because it's not the best book in the series. Okay, read it and keep going. That's it. Just like ACOFAE. Okay, you don't have to, you know, you read the first book and you keep going. I don't know. Quit your bitching.
Yeah, for real. And the books in Throne of Glass do get better. We're at Heir of Fire, and they just continually get better and more emotionally like draining and just wrecked as we go.
That's awful. I was so proud of myself. I didn't cry at this one. I was just kind of smiling the whole time because I was so happy for her. I was proud. She was growing and she's confronting shit that hasn't been confronted in a really long time. And good for her. Like, that's hard. We've all gone through our traumas and continue to go through, and we're probably still not completely acknowledging them. So can I confront my trauma and become this awesome fire-hearted fae? Because, you know, maybe it'd be a little bit easier if I had something coming out at the tail end of it all.
She is Aelin Ashriver Galathinius, and she would not be afraid. So good. It's so good. Just it's fantastic. I really like it. So Jess, what are your thoughts on this book? Do you like it? Did it live up to any expectations? Did you have expectations?
I liked it. I liked it. I'm not questioning if I liked it. I liked it better than the first book. The second book, I think I was just emotionally putting the pieces together. So obviously we had me sobbing for no fucking reason, except I was really happy. That was why I was crying. So in hindsight, that's why I was crying too. I was happy. And I was just so excited because that's where I felt like the adventure really picked up. Like that's where the story started. And I haven't had a book. ACOFAE was great in its own regard, and I loved that. And we know how emotional I get over Crescent City and ACOFAE and ACOWAR. But there's just something so different about this series that there isn't necessarily a found family trope yet, because it's still really her. She's still figuring herself out. She doesn't know who to trust. People keep coming in and out of her life. There is no rock or solid foundation she has. She is her own rock. And that rock's a little broken right now. There's a crack in it. And she still needs to work through her shit. And I feel like the story really took off after Crown of Midnight when I was putting those pieces together. This one is, again, another lay in the foundation. It's really cool seeing her come into her own. I love her starting to take ownership from the transition from Celaena to Aelin. I'm interested to see who knows, maybe there's going to be an uprising against Maeve because everybody in Mistward want to go to Terrasen now. That would be kind of cool. I'm not looking at you because I don't want to see your reaction. I really, her name carries a lot of weight, and her name gives a lot of people hope, and it'll be really, despite, like, even when there was the massacre at Andavir and Calcutta, and the orchestra still made it a point to take a stance against Otterlin in front of all of high society in Rithold. And they played the songs of those cities in memory of, I think that's really just like the smallest form of rebellion and the biggest way and the biggest fuck you to Otterlin, to the King of Otterlin. And I think like shit's gonna go down, and then everybody, it's gonna be fun. It's going to be fun. It's gonna be emotional. She's a leader, and we're gonna see more of that. Still not looking at you.
No, it's fine. I'm just thinking like the king slaughtered all of those musicians.
Oh yeah,
because he's just such an ass. Like,
all this
just
small dick
such a
energy. I cannot.
It's just awful. Yeah, man. It's really crazy. This is a little off topic, but I'm currently reading Scythe, the Scythe series. I don't know the author, but it's very science fiction. It's very philosophical about killing and death and the morality of it. It's pretty heavy. It's pretty good. But it makes me think a lot about what's happening in Throne of Glass and just the politics of everything, and how like Adian had to play this kind of double, I'm going to say double agent. That's not really the word, but like a two-faced kind of situation. And Chaol finally.
Well, Rhys did it for 50 years.
Right.
So here Adian is doing it for 10. Not that it negates what he's doing, but and it's on such a bigger scale too, because he has to fake battles every day. To have fake corpse along the property of Terrasen. And then they're like, you have the stench of dead bodies. But then they get up at the end of the day and they go home. Like, talk about everybody is playing the long game. And it's all about survival right now, too.
Yep, all about survival. And I have to say, Chaol finally fucking made a decision. I really don't like Chaol. I've made that very clear. But at the end, he's like, Dorian is my king. He finally puts his fucking foot down, and he
stops being a little bitch.
Stops being a bitch, but in the same breath, like, he flees. He turns on his heel and he runs. And like, yeah, he gets the dog, and like, that's great. That's great. Get the dog out. He gets the magic books. That's great too. But he leaves, and he leaves Dorian, and he leaves Adian. And at the end, it's just him and Ren. And they're like, yeah, well, fuck, it's just the two of us. Like, shit. What are we going to do?
How does nobody know about Celaena's apartment still? Like, I mean, technically it's Chaol's, because she's like, if anything happens to me, this is yours. But I don't know how nobody's made that connection. Adian was really the only one who goes, yep, this is my cousin's. This is her place.
Well, I think because the last time that Ren and Murtok saw her, she was like 8, so they don't, and that's kind of with Aedion too. Like Aedion has, he has a keener eye, but he's got the face senses too. But like Ren and Murtok, they don't know her very well, or, even at all, which is important because as much as Aedion has pledged his loyalty to Celaena, he says it again, like, I just want to see her again. She's my queen. And then, of course, we have the typical royal thing where they were like, well, do you want to be king? And he's like, I'm not going to talk about being king, or them getting married.
Yeah, do they evade that question because he kind of wants to?
No, when they were kids, they said, like, that's weird. Like, it's weird. But Aedion is steadfastly loyal. And we appreciate that. And, of course, we have Rowan, who is bound to Aelin forever. And then Chaol is doing whatever he's doing with Ren. So, the pieces are moving, and it's going to be really interesting to see where everything kind of heads. Because as you said, like, what could possibly happen in the next book? Of course, I know, like, I've read the series, but I'm trying to, like,
I know.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. I will say that everything starts to tighten. Like, we know that Aelin's coming back. We know where Dorian is. We know Sorcer's dead as fuck. We know where the witches are going.
Yeah, I feel like the end of this book, especially, I mean, not just everybody in the room with the King of Adarlan. I feel like the end of this book, I even texted you, I go, things are, I don't want to say falling into place, but things are shifting. Movement is happening for the next phase, whatever that is.
Yeah, it is. Like, the knot is tightening on everything, and it just gets better and better. So I'm very excited. I can only say that I'm very glad that Jesse decided to jump off the cliff and take this journey.
I'm so glad I did. I mean, it was never a matter of, do I want to? I wanted to. It was a matter of, am I emotionally in a place that I can do it? And I think it also helps that we're quarantined, we're home. I don't know if I could be doing this on my commute to the office and back. That really helps. It helps that I haven't been listening to, I told you, during work, because I've been listening to the audio version, if we haven't discussed that. I wouldn't listen at work because I want to pay attention. I don't want to be half listening. There's a lot of little things that are happening. I had messaged you again today about something. I go, oh, this is foreshadowing, and I'm so upset, and I'm already sad, and I'm only in book 3/4. So I don't want to know, and I mean, maybe it's just me being callous, but it's nice to feel again. And I feel like I'm feeling again with the books. I've just been kind of like, okay, on to the next book. And now I am evoking emotion again. And I forgot that was a thing.
Well, and that's why we love reading. And that is why we read.
Reading good books. Not all books will have me like this.
Actually, there's only a couple contemporary romance books that I can think of that have had you even slightly like this. Just like 2.
I mean, I see The Hating Game, and I think my connection with The Hating Game is because first they describe the lead male basically as human Reese. And it was also the first book that I read after I was coming off of the fantasy high of ACOFAE series. And I was just, I needed something that was light, but something that would make me giddy. And it was that book, really. That's the only one off the top of my head for a romance. The other ones that I just send you voice memos of me cackling because I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, what is going on?
In that vein, I can only recommend Addie LaRue. Addie LaRue had me clutching the stuffed animal that I have, just like silently crying. Well, and I had my headphones in when my husband is on the couch on the other end just staring at me like, are you okay? It's like, no.
And are you just like staring outside? You're staring at them. You're what? Staring at Zookspitz?
Yeah. I'm crying. Yeah, I'm staring at the Zookspitz, and I'm just like tears just running down my face, touching the stuffed animal on the couch. He's just like staring at me like, oh my god.
When I know I'm gonna get to a point because I have that beautiful Rosie Thorns blanket you got me from Lit Joy Crate. we'll tag it.
Shout out.
Right now it's on my couch because I want it pristine, but I know I'm going to be just wrapping myself around it and just rocking slowly somehow.
I should point this out. There are several reaction videos to the later Throne of Glass books. So shout out to Literary Libra and shout out to, I'm going to butcher the name. What is it? Rosebud?
I feel so bad.
She has a book club coming out, Book Buds. So we will tag her. You can check that out. She's done ACOTAR, Crescent City, and Throne of Glass, and she's starting her book club with Throne of Glass. So there are reaction videos out there. So Jess has done her own reaction videos. They are fantastic, but the theme of the reaction videos is they just get more tearful as you move in the books. So to everybody listening, if you've seen Jess's reaction videos, just know that as we get later on in the series, they will devolve into probably just sobs.
Tears.
Yeah.
Tears. Oh my gosh. And my reaction videos are I'm already crying at that point. So the fact that I'm going to be probably gasping for air, and that's not an exaggeration. I can't breathe. Oh man, it's going to be rough. I'm excited. Why am I so excited to be wrecked?
You just want to know what happens, probably.
That too. I'm curious with myself if I'm going to start Queen of Shadows today, or later today, or tomorrow. Definitely, maybe today. And then if it's going to take longer between books for me to go into the next book. Because right now I've picked it up right away. And then with ACOMAF to ACOWAR, I waited at least 2 weeks. Didn't eat. I survived off of seltzer and maybe the dragon fruit mango tea from Starbucks for 2 weeks. They kept my sugar up. So I don't know.
We will all find out together. And I think right before we wrap this up, I know, Jess, you wanted to mention a quote.
Did I?
You did.
What was the quote? Wait, continue. I interrupted you.
No,
I'm sorry.
you wanted to mention a quote that really resonated with you, the one you ordered pants about.
Oh, yes. So I saw the quote from the first book, and everybody talks about Rattle the Stars. And then in this episode, in Heir of Fire, I love that it just feels, I don't want to say complete, full circle, but I love that Aelin, I was going to say Celaena, Aelin says it again and says, and then I'm going to rattle the stars. And I think I mean, everybody focuses on the rattle the stars part, which is fine. And I ordered a pair of joggers from Chasing Chapters. But I love the entirety of the quote of, you could rattle the stars, you can do anything if only you dared, and deep down you know it too. And I think, why do I always have to get emotional about this stuff that hits me so hard? I think it's just so beautiful that you sometimes, again, just like we can be our own worst enemy, we can also be our biggest cheerleader at the same time. And to know that you can do your own shit if you believed in yourself, or you can do it, and that's what scares you. I think Sarah's after my adult heart. I think it's so beautiful, and it's important. And I think that's one of the reasons I love our podcast is we're reading YA from an adult lens. So it absolutely hits differently. Sometimes these quotes are applicable for different points in your life. So if you are 13 or you're 14 or you're in that YA demographic, just hold on to these quotes because they're going to carry you. There's a reason people get the stuff tattooed. It's a reminder. A lot of it's just a reminder for yourself. That's really, at the end of the day, is know your worth and know what you're capable of. And if it scares you, maybe that means you're going in the right direction. I don't know. I think it's just so pretty. I'm gonna not try to cry.
I know your eyes are so big and glassy. I was looking to see if the tears would start falling.
No, I held them in. What did the kids say? My eyes are sweating.
My eyes are sweating.
My eyes are sweating.
Well, I think that's a really good way to wrap up this episode. We have Jessica's absolutely emotional proclamation about how you can do anything if you only try. And that is absolutely beautiful. And the lessons that we take from Sarah and her book series continue. There is a reason why people get this stuff tattooed on them. It's beautiful.
feel free to follow us on Instagram at ACOFAE podcast, ACOFAE podcast. Our next episode, we plan on doing a recap of ACOTAR. We kind of broke it up this week, but as we get into A Court of Silver Flames coming out February 16th, we wanted to do a ACOTAR episode, and then following that, we're going to just do a whole series recap. We know some people have been commenting on our Instagram of stuff that they want to hear us talk about that we definitely haven't added or discussed in some of our podcasts, and try to clean it up and just remember what the hell has been happening for the last 1,000,000 years and what information or new speculations we have about Nesta, about Cassian, about Azriel, basically the whole inner court.
So it's very exciting. So don't forget to tune in next week on Monday, and we will have something new for you. Glad you could be with us.
Bye.